Welcome to Burning Questions from 500 Degrees. We work together as a company. 500 Degrees is a content and fulfillment shop. We have offices in Toronto, Miami, Columbus, Ohio, and we work with some of the best QSRs in the country, convenience stores, and new clients in the automotive industry. So we're expanding. And we create thousands of images and assets that are deployed on multiple digital platforms. And if you want to learn more about us, go to weare500degrees.com and give us a shout, and we'll get back to you. The best thing about my job is the people that I come into contact during our work day. And it's great vendors, great associates, great people, great law firms. And that's what we want to share in this podcast. And today we welcome the folks from Davis+Gilbert. I'm going to call you guys the dynamic duo. When I've been working with Davis+Gilbert for over 25 years, and you guys have always been great stewards of our legal issues and keeping us out of trouble and just keeping us on the path from contracts to trademarks to whatever it is that we have to do from claims. I'm going to first introduce Ashima Dayal. And Ashima, you work on the counsel side, I would call it, in terms of trademark clearance, claims clearance, IP protection, numerous activities on your side, Columbia law, and a background in art history. You've been a partner for 21 years at Davis+Gilbert, so welcome here. And then on the other side of the plane, we have, I would call it trial services, but in terms of, and we don't want to get to the point where we actually go to trial. But if you do go to trial, Ina is the other part of this dynamic duo. Ina Scher is your partner at Davis+Gilbert, Boston University Law. But prior to coming on board to Davis+Gilbert, you were an assistant district attorney in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. So we know how busy that office is. And when it comes to protecting what we want to do, even if it doesn't want to go to trial, we really welcome you to the party today. What we would like to start out with is AI. So I've started to see in just client contracts, because with our bigger clients, we tend to indemnify our clients. We stand in the way of lawsuits. We're responsible for training our people, putting through all of the knockout and the trademark claims and getting everything done prior to even presenting concepts to our clients. But with AI and the generative side of it, I'm going to throw it to you first, Ashima. What are you seeing from a contractual point of view or a watch out point of view on generative AI, particularly when people in the concept stage are using it for storyboard creation, image creation, even content creation for blogs and podcasts, for example? What do you think about that?
So first, thanks for having us. I appreciate it. We're excited to be here and to talk about our practice and what we do for clients, including 500 Degrees. I want to take a half a step back on AI. AI has become a radioactive term, and clients reflexively are telling their agencies not to use AI. That's what we are seeing because they're responding to issues that have arisen that they've heard about. Frankly, many of them have never experienced anything that resembles a dispute, but they've heard that AI is problematic and they don't distinguish between the different types of AI. And many of them are already using AI in their own business, and their agencies are using it. They just don't realize their agencies are using it. So there's lots of different kinds of AI, and it's incredibly effective, efficient, cost savings when you're crunching massive amounts of data. So when you're targeting ads, when you're buying ads, if you're doing anything in the programmatic space, if you are trying to create narrow audiences for products, and I know in the QSR space, creating very narrow target audiences is incredibly important. You're using AI whether you realize it or not. So if a client suddenly says, you know what, I've been hearing about AI, I want to make sure you guys aren't using AI, it's really important to hit pause and make sure they understand what kind of AI you're already using and what kind of AI they think they're objecting to. But you mentioned generative AI, and that is the kind that they really are objecting to, that clients really are objecting to, whether they know it or not. So generative AI is a form of artificial intelligence that when you give it commands, it creates content based on what's been fed to it. So it's got a lot of human intervention, whether people realize it or not, but that human intervention largely exists on the training side. So you're training the AI engine. So you are feeding it stuff. You are feeding it third-party content more of the time, if not all of the time, and then it's generating something. It could be generating content that is copy. It could be generating content that is an image. It could be generating content that is a video. And that's where clients are hitting pause or even hitting a full red light stop button because they don't want to have the problems that they've heard about. And those problems fall into a number of places. The first one, and this is kind of the lightest concern they have, is confidentiality.
Mm,
Often you are asking
yeah,
the AI engine, which you don't own. It's a third-party AI engine, and people are very familiar with ChatGPT, but certainly there's many others. And the questions you are asking it go into its question bank and have no confidentiality. So you can often tip off what your client is doing. If you're doing a Super Bowl spot and you're asking it to generate, images of cats playing the piano, that engine now knows who you are and what kind of query you are interested in. And the image that it renders, part two, is generally not something that they are giving to you exclusively. So there's non exclusivity when your client may have wanted, for example, to maintain confidentiality and also to own what it's creating. The
right.
third part, the part that they're really alarmed about, the clients are alarmed about, and rightly so, is that quite often what that engine creates, what that AI engine creates, is it's using third party content and it's doing so in a way that has no permission associated with it. So it very often could be deemed to be infringing. There's a lot of discussion that's been going on in legal journals and in even the popular press as to whether or not something is infringing when you can't pick out the original components, when you can't tell what was fed into it because the thing that is rendered by the AI engine looks nothing like it. Has infringement really occurred, right? If you feed it 600 photos of cats and then you ask it to produce an image of a cat and the cat photo that comes out looks nothing like the 600 photos but just has the general contours of a cat, is it still infringing any of those individual photos when you cannot find anything that is even similar to any of those original 600 in the mishmash that the AI engine produces? So there's lots of concerns with generative AI, and I've only touched upon some of them. You can often protect yourself between you and your client um, through careful contract terms, things like indemnity, things like assurances of no originality, things about when we use an AI engine, we cannot assure you, the client, that you will own exclusively all of what you produce. That's not to say your client will sign on to that, but you as an agency can try to get in terms so that you can use AI engines, shifting any responsibility onto the client, or at least trying to assure them of certain kinds of protections that you can provide, or shifting away from the protections you can't provide. Indemnity is a place where it's important. Reps and warranties, making sure you're not giving any reps and warranties of exclusivity, reps and warranties of originality, reps and warranties of no third party materials were used. All of those things can go into a contract. That's not to say clients will sign on to them, as I said, but there are ways to make sure you are able to use AI. The other thing is to have a conversation with your client about what AI is and make sure they understand, as I said at the beginning, because AI can be a huge cost savings. We have clients right now that, at least for comps, not public facing material, but at least for comps, and comps include both regular, still kind of mood board comps and then full on, animatics if they're doing a television commercial or
Sure.
something else in the video space, where they're using AI in order to generate what they need to give the client a look and feel, an idea of what the final production will look like. And it is so much more effective because it's quicker and less expensive to do it that way. So that's a sort of middle place where you and clients can often meet, in that they will save a lot of money, they will save a lot of time. It is a lot easier on the agency. It's just a hell of a lot less work than, sort of putting together a mood board or a clip reel, a sizzle reel, but just ensuring them that none of this will be public facing.
So
There's lots of ways to use it effectively.
well, I think, and I'm gonna pop over to Ina here in terms of it's a new field, so you probably haven't seen any trial yet, but it's going to come, and it's either going to be a relationship issue between agency and client in terms of contract violation or whatever the terms that we've agreed to based on the definitions of AI. Because I see your point, Ashima, the idea of discussing what the terms are and the usage and the fair rights and where we stop and where we start. But I know on your side, what are you going to anticipate doing either between client and agency in terms of disagreement, or perhaps somebody who's out there, a rapacious firm that says we found something that we think is leading and improper and or false. What do you see about the future of protecting ourselves or protecting our clients?
So that's where it's actually pretty tricky to kind of predict how the courts are going to view these issues. And that's one of the things that's so interesting about advertising law. There's always something new that no one had ever thought of before. And we try to protect our clients by anticipating what the legal risks could be. But in an area like this, where the technology is outpacing the law and the regulations, it's sometimes hard to predict, but we use past experience and analogous situations. And what we really are trying to keep an eye out for is there are concerns about the regulators, but there are also greater concerns about class action plaintiffs' lawyers who carefully monitor the market, are always keeping a very close eye on the advertising industry, and quickly jump on to various issues and start making claims and testing what the legal precedent will turn out to be. And I think that the area that's a risk, that's an obvious risk with AI, is false or misleading communications, that there's something inherently deceptive about the way that images are being created, messages are being conveyed through the use of AI. And we don't yet have a clear way to inform consumers, and consumers may not yet have an understanding of the significance of AI, what it means. And so it's hard to give the proper disclosures and caveats to images and messages that are being conveyed through advertising using this new
So,
technology.
when you're in the process of mediating, or at least looking at the merits of an argument that has been raised against a client or an agency, and you're looking for that evidence trail, the proof, would you suggest it's a good idea to, I don't know if it's an affidavit, I'm not sure what the term would be, but to lock down the steps of everything that we've done to create an ad, an image, a piece of digital display work, what have you? How would you recommend to clients in the agency world to create that trail? So if we ever have to come back and do it, it's presented well.
Very often there are cases that are brought years after the content was created, and very often there's been turnover in an agency, and the people who were directly involved may no longer be involved, may no longer be there and able to answer
True.
questions. And so sometimes it is very difficult to piece together the steps that were made. And even agencies that have good record keeping and good policies, those policies are only as good as the compliance with them. And when people are busy and trying to meet deadlines and satisfy clients, they're not always conscientious about keeping the record of what actually occurred. And so it's very important to keep that in mind, but it's also important to keep in mind that more casual conversations, particularly by email and now more by text and by Slack, people say things in those communications without recognizing that those are discoverable,
Right.
and could be required to be produced to the other side if you end up in a litigation. And so it's more often that the risks and the challenges are presented in people very casually making offhand comments that could later be difficult to explain out of context in a deposition, or if you end up
Sure.
at trial.
And Ashima, back to you. I'm going to follow a thread here in terms of the actual either graphic input or editorial input into a generative platform. If we count through just the testing, just the people that are being, casually interested in how all of this works, but it invades the workforce. And somehow IP is, or a brief or information or confidential information is pushed into a generative platform to like, hey, explore. I just got a brief from a client. I'm going to throw it into ChatGPT. We've already trained our people to, that's verboten. You can't do that. But do you see a bit of that as a restraint or something that everybody has to be on top of?
I think agencies shouldn't be. I mean, my personal opinion is that agencies shouldn't be making this verboten. They should make rules for how to use it, but it's too efficient an engine. So the first thing I would say is there's hallucinations. That's the term that's used for basically the crap that an AI engine, the Chat GPT, using them as an example, although they're certainly not the only ones. And I don't mean to suggest that everything they produce is inaccurate. But just the same way that you feed in photos and the photo you get back has three hands in it, that's sort of the classic, right? Is that the photo you get back, for whatever reason, AI engines have a very difficult time with limbs. They seem to produce lots of photos that have three hands or six fingers.
Or misspelling.
So that's on the tech side, right? So they also produce false answers. Or there's been a lot of cases. There's one involving Michael Cohen, Trump's, I guess, former attorney, where he produced a brief to a court in a court case, which I believe he was the defendant in, that had just fabricated cases. These cases did not exist. They looked exactly like cases would look, but they were just there was no court, there was no decision, there was no judge. It just made up cases. These same kind of hallucinations happen on the factual side in advertising. So if you're trying to produce, you're doing a creative brief and you've got a new chicken product, and you want it to produce information on, and it's, let's say it's organic, and you want information on organic farming, do not trust. So back to your question, do not trust the information that an AI engine produces. It is the start of an investigation. It's sort of the ground zero, but it's not where you should land. The second, and this has gotten a little bit of attention, and I think it should get more attention, is the fact that there are enormous biases in what AI produces. So if you ask it to produce a picture of a professional woman, 99% of the time, and I'm exaggerating by a huge amount, but it will produce a picture of a white woman. It will not produce a picture of a woman of color. If you ask it to produce a picture of a woman of color, it will produce a light-skinned woman of color. So and that's not because the AI engine is, I'm going to just say racist as shorthand. It's because the images that have been fed into it are images that show professional white women, because there's just fewer pictures out there that are being fed, or just fewer pictures out there, full stop, of women of color carrying briefcases wearing business suits. So the AI engine is often producing images that just perpetuate biases, and brands, need to be cognizant of that, need to be sensitive of the fact that some of the information that they're receiving out of an AI engine may, they need to step back and take a look at that and say, wait a minute, is this really what we want? And is this really the message that we need to be putting out there? And some of that has gotten attention, but I think that that's something that people are, as wokeness increases in the advertising industry, I think that that's getting more attention. One of the things that's interesting is in Europe, in the last few weeks, they've produced this AI Act. It covers all sort of 27 EU nations, and it requires very careful use of AI. But two of the things probably most relevant to the ad industry is that it requires disclosure on advertising. You have to say when an ad was produced using AI. That's not something we need to do in the US outside of the political space. Political advertising needs to disclose when AI was involved in certain states. But the second one is that they also have to indicate, they have to report, not publicly, but to like a centralized board, what information was used to generate the AI, how they trained the AI engine. Because that's information that's being compiled as well. I assume for bias reasons, but perhaps also going back to Ina's point, to make sure there is a record of what was fed in, because memories change, people disappear. It's going to be hard if people didn't keep good briefing books for the client work they did to know what the source material was for an ad. So that's something that's happening in Europe that we haven't yet adopted in the US, but Biden's been very active in this space.
Everything that happens in Europe then goes to California, then sweeps across the U.S. Ashima, you mentioned politics, I believe. We're entering a political race that is contentious, to say the least, between two parties. We've seen disinformation campaigns in the last election. And not to say that each of the parties or enemy government actors aren't beneath the use of AI, but the ability for we as voters to understand what is real, what is not. I guess trust your instinct and be a smart buyer was certainly the first course of action for all of us as voters. But how do we pick apart what's happening in terms of either a Joe Biden ad or a Donald Trump ad that somebody has used visual AI to create words and thoughts and deeds that perhaps that candidate has never said before in their life, and it's in and it's out. It seems on the political side, they get a pass. What's happening there in terms of the laws that we already have on the books and the enforcement of them?
I would not say that people are getting a pass. It may seem like they are getting a pass, but there are challenges going on. And I want to just take a step back when you said, we're not sure what happened in the last election. If one is to believe stories in the Washington Post, New York Times, and other mainstream national newspapers, there was a decent amount of reporting about foreign interference with subgroups in messaging that was put out, especially in messaging that was put out in connection with a lot of female-centered organizations, where messages were put out using AI, targeting individuals, trying to send positive or negative messages about candidates that were just entirely fabricated. So that, again, that's sort of what we talked about AI and how good it is at micro-targeting, because it can crunch vast amounts of data and identify audiences. That was used in the political space. The same way it could try to sell you a cable subscription or sell you a new car because it knows you need a minivan. They were also able to target individuals based on the very specific interests that they had. If you're interested in immigration, it had a message, often false, about one of the candidates' immigration platform. There are false advertising laws on the books in every state, and very rarely do candidates make claims against each other, but they do on occasion happen. They happen more on the lower level races, statewide races, not on the national races, but they do occasionally happen. The difficulty in bringing those cases is that there's obviously First Amendment protections for political speech that doesn't exist for commercial speech. Quite often, it's not about monetary damages. It's about stopping the ad. And by the time the ad has run, right? Because I'm not going to, if I'm in the Biden campaign, I'm not going to sue the Trump campaign for money. It's not money I want. I want them to stop running the ad. And the ad is run for such a short period of time already. It's off the air by the time there's the damage is done, right? You can't sort of unspin that. Or as Ina often likes to say, you can't, what is it, unring the bell, you like to say, or can't put the horse back in the barn? I forget which one is your phrase.
Both. I mean, Ina, you just wouldn't have time to be able to bring something to court. By then it's done and the campaign's over. So do you think people rely on that?
I mean, there are some emergency applications. You can seek injunctive relief to get something addressed more quickly. But very often, clients come to us and say, we need to remedy this. We need to do something quickly. And often they're disappointed to learn that litigation and going to trial is a very slow, expensive, and burdensome process that isn't going to get them the quick result that they're hoping for. And so I think in the political arena, we're relying on the press to fact check things and call out things that are blatantly false or misinformation. And they are going to do that with images as well. If something has been altered in a visual representation, now people are aware of that. And I think that that's going to be more of an issue and certainly is something that we're seeing more of in terms of monitoring and addressing in public forums, if not in litigation.
And one of the problems is that the FEC has a regulation, at least in the television and radio space, they have a regulation that broadcasters are immunized for the content, that political content they run, as long as they do not alter it. So if you see an ad, if you're a television station, television network, you cannot change that ad. You are not allowed to touch it in any way. You are obliged to run that. In exchange for that, you get immunity for that ad.
And do they clear it? Do they have to clear storyboards or do pre-clearance on any of their advertising for politics? I should know this because I'm an advertising person, but I don't.
Well, you maybe team. or you don't have any yet. You don't have any political candidates, so you would learn it when you need to learn it. But no, that doesn't happen. They in fact required. There's a lowest unit price. They're required to sell that ad time at the lowest price that they have, to sell that at the same price to all qualified candidates, all sorts of things that the media makes a lot of money during the election season, but they also don't get to charge the highest unit price, et cetera, et cetera. There's all sorts of constraints on the media. They also get a free pass in the way they wouldn't for a false QSR ad. They get a free pass for a false political ad in exchange for not making changes to that ad. Political advertising is fascinating, and people, if they're sort of sitting on the sidelines watching it, especially in the AI space, it's going to be right now in the states, not the federal level, that they're going to see regulation. The states are the ones who are saying that you cannot run an ad that uses AI without disclosing it uses AI. And you used an example, Matt, that I think is a great example because it's an actual real world example, not a hypothetical, where people are animating the mouths of candidates and putting words in their mouths that they never said. And from a viewer perspective, I mean, this is the best damn lip syncing you're going to see. I saw one the other day, and I swear the candidate, the mouth aligned perfectly with the words they were saying.
Yeah. It's not like Clutch Cargo and that famous cartoon where it's animated except for the lips or some live reader in the background. But
and you only had to feed in 6 words for them to get the vocal tone right? You've got like 3 speeches, you feed those in, and they can do a full made up, all of a sudden, Trump is supporting immigration and Biden is, whatever, Trumpian platform he might otherwise reject.
Right.
It's astonishing how good this stuff is. And you can see why the EU is saying you have to disclose when you use AI. And the same thing with the states, because it's really frightening, because people aren't going to read the disclosure. Need to, in some ways, they need to outlaw it.
We could talk for a long time on all these issues, and this will not be your last appearance on burning questions. But I have one last burning question for each of you, and I'll start with Ina. What are you reading? What's on your bedside table that you're reading that you're fascinated with, or what's on your playlist for music? And talk to us. What are you interested in? Even podcasts you listen to besides burning questions?
I am a huge reader, and so I am always reading something. I skew toward nonfiction, and I just finished Shoe Dog, which is Phil Knight's memoir about the founding of Nike, and it is a fascinating read. He's a great writer and a very inspirational story. So I highly recommend it.
And great. The Ben Affleck film associated with Shoe Dog was incredible. I thought that was great. So I'll pick that up, and we're going to put that out. We're going to put that out for our listeners for like the top ad legends reading list. Now, Ashima, before we close, what are you reading, or what are you listening to, or what podcasts fascinate you?
Okay, so what I'm listening to is Maggie Rogers' new album. I'm obsessed with Maggie Rogers. I'm like 3 times the age of everyone who listens to Maggie Rogers, but I am absolutely obsessed with her. And I have listened to Beyonce's new album. I need to listen to it more. I'm a huge Jolene fan. I'm trying to decide if I'm okay with her changing all of the lyrics. I understand Dolly Parton has fully endorsed it, but I'm not quite there yet. I think I need to listen to it a little bit more. What I've heard I like, and I really do like Beyonce, and then what I'm reading, normally I read only fiction. I love to escape in fiction, but I read an essay by this feminist writer named Rebecca Solnit recently, and someone recommended to me the essay, and then I picked up a book of her essays. Her book has the most wonderful name. It's Men Explain Things to Me. And it's fantastic. That the essay that was given to me is called Men Explain Things to Me. And it's about how she was at a party And someone asked her what she does. She said she's a writer, and they asked her what she was writing about, and she told them what she had written about. And they said, oh, there's a new book out about that. And they start explaining that book. And she says, I know, I'm the author of that book. The guy completely ignores her and goes on to continue to explain to her a book that she wrote. It's very funny. She has a very, very, very good sense of humor about something that would infuriate me. And the first chapter about mansplaining. The rest of it's not about that. But I have been enjoying reading that. I read very, very, very little nonfiction. I'm the opposite of Ina, I guess. But I've been enjoying that tremendously.
We're going to close it out. Thanks so much for coming on. And a pro tip again for everybody, if you're an advertising agency leader, or if you're a corporation that spends millions of dollars on advertising and marketing, either B2C, B2G, or B2B, doesn't matter, run, don't walk, and talk to the folks at Davis+Gilbert. It's a life-changing move for anybody that wants to lead in our industry, and I appreciate you guys coming on. We're 500 degrees, content and fulfillment, Toronto, Miami, Columbus, Ohio. Come visit us. I want to thank our producer, Jennifer Hegren, and the group from Fallback Studios. Thanks for having us, and we'll see you later. Click the link and follow us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Matt.
On the next episode of Burning Questions, since COVID, the world of audio marketing has changed completely. And I'm going to bring the ear candy along with Chris Foley. She's the division president at iHeartRadio.
I always say you can have the best party ever, but if you never send out the invites, no one knows it happened. Because we reach 89% of America with our broadcast properties, we're able to tease the content that we feel like will resonate.
She's going to help you cut through the noise of a crowded marketplace and leverage audio platforms to build your brand. Going behind the mic with iHeartRadio's Chris Foley on the next Burning Questions.